and then there's somebody I would like to start with first, but I want to hear from the rest of you. So student loan debt, as you may be aware, has gone up dramatically. Since 1995, student loan debt in this country was $187 billion. In March of this year, it was $1.67 trillion. So it has gone up in the last 25, 27 years or so, almost 10 times. And I'm going to, before I put this out, I want to have an example of this. I'm going to use myself as an example. I have attended a private college. I have also attended a public college. It was a while ago, but I want to use this as an example. And what I want to do is compare it to the rate of inflation. In the late 1970s, I attended a private college. At the time, the cost of that college was a little between, we'll say, $3,000 to $3,500. That included tuition, as well as room and board and fees and so forth. I looked up my alma mater recently. That cost is $50,000 now. And that is up about 14, 15% over the last 40 years. During that time, the rate of inflation is about 2.5%. Inflation has been fairly at a low level since the early 80s until recently with COVID. In the 1980s, I also attended a public college. During that time, the tuition for a semester there was about $1,000 for full time. The tuition at that public college now is about $10,000. So it has gone up 9 or 10 times. The rate of inflation is maybe about 1.5 times since the late 80s, early 90s when I got there. President Biden recently did an executive order where he was going to put a credit on delinquent student loan accounts of $10,000 and with some exceptions, $20,000. My first thought was on this, and I was playing, and we kind of alluded to this earlier in the show, I'm going to call it the tough love card. Like, well, I had a student loan, I paid it off. It was back in the 90s, but I did that. They can do that as well. However, things have changed on that. Debt has become a lot higher. The cost, particularly of tuition and fees, has also gone up quite a bit. So on that, I'm going to just leave it at that. And actually, I want to start with Mark here, because Mark and I actually attended the same school, albeit at different times. And I wanted to hear, Mark, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, by the time I was only a few years after you, but by the time I went to that college, it was about $8,000 to $9,000 a year to go there board. And I come from a middle-class family that I was the first person to go to college in my family, and I still haven't paid off my student loans, and that's a long time. But I graduated from college and went to work in theater and made very little money doing that. And I'm not a high income earner. So it's been a struggle for me my whole life, paying back I worked as an AmeriCorps worker for 2 years, and I was able to take $10,000 off my student loan, but interest rates on a student loan are so incredibly high, and our government is profiting off of the backs of people trying to get an education. And I just find the whole thing to be ridiculous. Our educational system in our country with higher education, and the fact that so many people have to go in debt for their whole life, just accept that because they wanted to get a college education. I applaud President Biden, and I think the entire student debt should be, I think they should just forgive student debt and move on from there. That's
Mark, do you think you're going to pay that off, may I ask?
I'd like to, but in the realm of bills in my life and things that I have to pay for, it can sometimes be something that gets put at the bottom of the list for me, unfortunately, and being quite honest about that too. And plus, I know there's so many predatory college situations where people are lured into getting a job as a medical assistant at some college run by people with cigars, and then they qualify for student loans because of their situation, and then they get a job where they make minimum wage and have to pay off this $6,000 bill to some profiting college situation that isn't really about educating people. And that's prevalent like Trump University was an example of that, but there's many places like that that do that. And so I don't know, in the grand scheme of our budget for our country and how much money we put into like the defense budget, and then how much money we give to programs that help people, it's just immoral to me. It's immoral, the way we spend our money and the way we invest our money in this country, in our people. That's my opinion.
Dan.
I mean, just to piggyback a little bit on what Mark said, a lot of the rules around student loans are unique to student loans, and they're very unfair. It's a higher interest that's much above the market. You're not allowed to file for bankruptcy on a student loan. You can garnish even Social Security wages can be garnished for student loans. When I went to school, I could work and pay off school. I worked through school and paid it off. You can't do that anymore. You cannot do it with these enormous numbers. So my son has student loans because I couldn't afford to pay for all of his college. And he's looking forward that he's going to have them for an enormous amount of time. He even had some Pell Grants, so he might be eligible for the higher amount. But that is, so we have all these rules surrounding it where we're very punitive to students. We have no problem bailing, out the banks in 2008. We have no problem doing the PPP loans. We have no problems paying for people whose houses have been flooded 7 times. So it's really priorities and what's important. They've talked about making certain levels of school free. That hasn't been, we couldn't do it in the political climate. So I think what you have to look at is not just that we're forgiving a loan, but all these things stacked up against somebody who has to take one out. And Mark's an example. I'll stop there and give somebody else a chance to talk.
Well,
Anybody else? Karen?
Yeah,
Oh, Calvin, go ahead.
yeah. My question was going to be: is it really? Why are the schools allowed to charge such high rates? Why are they allowed to charge so much for tuition? Is it really, really that much? Does it cost that much? And where the hell is all that money going? That's all I had to say.
Some of that would be government funding, state school for the state, and for private schools, donations. There are private schools that have closed over the years because their donations, went down to nothing on that. And they may also be receiving money from the government as well. Anybody else? JD, Karen, Robin, any comments on that?
I have nothing because I don't understand it. I don't understand how a person has to spend the rest of their life paying off a school debt.
There are scenarios that I've read about where the debt, because of, as Mark alluded to, interest payments, the debt has increased over time.
Yes, and you can't.
It's tens of thousands of dollars, or even 6 figures in some cases.
Exactly, and I've never had one, but I was told recently that you can't even refinance it. Mm-hmm. Like you can't do anything to reduce the interest rate.
I do not know the school that Mark and I went to. As I mentioned, it's $50K a year now. I cannot even imagine even going there now.
Yeah.
And I paid for some of it. My family did pay for some of it, admittedly. I do not believe, knowing what my father was doing back then, my family was doing back then, if that would be even possible now.
I doubt it. I mean, even community college is the cost has increased dramatically. Mm-hmm. You could, at one point in time, you could do your community college and get your degree for a total of $3,000, maybe, books included, but now student loans and Pell Grants.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
I was going to say, as far as when Karen was talking about community colleges, there was a time I remember some people would use that to offset the cost of the prerequisites in order to try to make it a little more affordable. And I was fortunate enough not to have had to take a student loan. I was the one when I did grad school, I did it out of my own pocket.
It appears that according to the red behind Mr. Gibbs there, that our time is getting short here. So thank you all very much. I'm going to send it back over to you, Calvin.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Thank you all for that stimulating conversation. I hope you all had a chance to get your point across. And again, I want to thank the listeners for listening to this episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Yes, we have a long way to go with safety in schools. Yes, we have a long way to go with tuitions and grants and student loans. But I believe that there's an answer to everything. Karen and I went to a school that taught us there is an answer to everything. And it seems that the answer to most of these problems boils down to money. So we need to figure this out, folks. Until the next episode of Diverse Talking Heads, I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. It's always in parting that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here. Until the next episode, exit stage left.